The deep end. You know, science is the how of everything. You know, it's looking at how things work. The you know, in biology and life, in physics and astronomy and the universe. But behind it all, there's this pesky little why. You see, why? Now, today, everything's happening faster than ever before, which means that change is happening faster, and that we can actually see the changes as they're happening. Before, it took hundreds of years for a change to happen. Now, every 5 years, man, it's a different reality. Now, on the deep end, part of what I've tried to do is just free associate and lay out an anatomy of wonder, a grid, a schematic to hang our wonder on and somehow create an orientation within the mystery, even though the orientation is provisional at best. So let me review just for a minute, because I think it's important. Not everybody's listened to all the podcasts and is up on it. I laid out 3 orders of existence: being, life, and consciousness, each giving rise to the next by way of 3 essential processes. And I want us to keep these essential processes in mind as we go through today's podcast. That's semi-permeability, complexification, and differentiation. Being went through this. If you look at how the universe got heavier, how gases became metal, how planets formed, these 3 essential processes are there until life happens, and they give rise to life. And life gave rise, through the same 3 essential processes, to consciousness. Now, I will say consciousness is one of the big mysteries, but we're inside of it. And with all the change happening, we can get little glimmers, in my mind at least, of the why of it all. We can see these 3 essential processes at work, and the speeding up allows us to get up close to them. But it also invites so much change that it's difficult to accommodate and assimilate. And that's another aspect of the metaphysic, is the storytelling, how we accommodate, how we use our stories to help us to new orders of understanding. So today, we're going to talk about the why. Now, we can actually see glimmers of the why. Look at the 2 primary religious / spiritual orientations. In the East, it's reincarnation. In the West, it's heaven and hell. Now, I don't know if either of those is true, but what I do know is both of them reveal a quality of the human why, and it's called justice. And through previous podcasts, we've talked about my holy trinity, and I think my cohorts would agree to some degree, truth, love, and justice. You see, we're now getting at a little glimmer of the why within all the hows. And we can begin to see through these 3 essential processes of semi-permeability, complexification, and differentiation, we can begin to see glimmers of what is our deeper intent. What is it? And once we begin to do that, it seems to me that a huge part of the why is to touch. To touch. And that encapsulates the truth, love, and justice thing. It's how we manage ourselves in this great conglomerate mess of the human family. So today I want to talk about, how do we apply this metaphysic? Now, one of the threads that I've pulled on that's easy to track is communication. They say that the first words that were ever spoken were probably, "Where are you?" or the first question, because they were foraging and they were yelling to each other in the forest or wherever they were. And after language evolved, what happens is writing. And after writing evolves, what happens? The printing press. You see what's happening? The printing press, we start talking to each other. We start reading each other's words. We start understanding. Education starts happening. And all of a sudden, you get people like Tesla and Marconi, and radio happens. and then TV and the internet and social media, and that's where we are today. You see, it's gotten complex and it's differentiated, and there's semi-permeability. And the whole social media thing, we're really arguing with ourselves now is what are the boundaries of social media that is a healthy boundary so that we don't create just hate, but we really get back to the truth, love, and justice piece. And so a piece I want to leave us with, the two questions I'm going to propose to my cohorts, Bob and Mary Ann. What else other than communication can we see this metaphysic, these three essential processes playing out in? And the most important one, why is consciousness doing this? Where is it going to take us? Now, see, I don't think we need to know what the end is, what the final conclusion is, because I don't think reason can actually take us there. Reason can take us so far. But what we have to see is consciousness is about reason to some extent. And is there another order of existence that we're now working on, that we're now preparing for, that we're setting the groundwork for? And how do we see that? Now, those are some big questions, and I just laid out a whole lot of stuff. So, Bob and Mary Ann, we're talking about applied metaphysics, getting glimmers of the why within all the stuff that we're doing. And again, I think communication gives us a real hint of the ability and the need for us to touch each other, for us to be part of each other and to recognize that. And the whole concept of oneness has been part of this podcast anyway. So, Mary Ann, I'll throw it to you first. What say ye on such crazy thoughts?
Well, I would think that, to me, this gets to the heart of everything. Why anything at all? Why are we here? What are we doing? And I think that, and I've been thinking about this a lot today. You know, we're going about all of these actions and all of these things that we're pursuing in our life, and what happens to it all? It just fades into history. And so I really think, and you touched on this, I think that it's the relationships that we build, and it's those connections between us that is the electrifying light that is building something, and I have no idea what that is. But I can see glimmers. I can see pieces where I can go, oh, okay, this is something that is worthwhile, and this is something worth pursuing. And ultimately, it all comes down to, how can I lift you? How can you lift me? How can we interact together in order to try and realize something that I think inside all of us, there's this inkling of there's something that we're all reaching for, we're all striving for. And it isn't until we can come together that becomes crystallized, that can become meaningful, because on our own we can just speculate, but when we come together in that relationship, where we are semi-permeable, where we move in and out of each other, that we can start to realize that something's happening, and what it is, I don't know, but I like to speculate.
Amen.
So,
Bob, how about you?
Well, it's when you start asking, why anything, or why are we doing it, we're getting into a motivational aspect of consciousness. And consciousness itself is something we're not really sure of what it all amounts to. Are we always conscious? Are we just conscious at certain times? Or are we conscious of things that we choose to be conscious about? Or are we conscious of things that we've been programmed, I'll use air quotes there, programmed to be conscious of? And when you take a look at all of these different aspects, and then you realize that each one of us is unique in the way those aspects are crystallized around us. And then we start interacting with other people. And we know from many, many studies and life experiences that consciousness can't exist in isolation. It's only through interaction with other people that we become conscious. And then you overlay that with what the anthropologists call culture. And that's the artifacts that we create through these interactions. And they then are able to feed back upon us. We're able to look at something that someone 100 years ago wrote and get an insight into something we're thinking about today. And all of these different interactions, it's almost like, we've heard the term, planetary brain or universal brain or something like that. And if you kind of step back from it and look at all of the different interactions between people in terms or analogous to the electrical interactions that are going on in the brain, you see a similar pattern that we're interacting with each other and passing on all of these different items of consciousness and items of culture.
And so you're back at the how consciousness works.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to address today, and I want you to bend it back towards this of the why, because I think through all of that we can get little flits and insights into this purpose that predates maybe the universe itself and that we are a part of through the three essential processes, through the different orders. Consciousness is doing something, and I keep wanting to say in my own mind to what end, and yet that's more hopeful than I could ever get.
Yeah.
I just want, at my view at this point, my conclusion is, again, truth, love, justice. It's about touching. Marianne used the word relationship. And Bob, everything you talked about was how all the pieces come into relationship. So once that's done, why? I mean, what is it really a justice?
That's my big question.
But
that's like asking, why do we have gravity?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
It's an essential part of the universe.
I don't think it's the same. I think it's different because it's about the human being. It's not about being itself. It's about consciousness. Consciousness is a different order, and we within consciousness are able to discern some intent and impetus of the movement. And Marianne, what you kept talking about was reaching for,
Yes, because much of that is speculation.
Yeah, to me, what's happening is something is reaching through us. There is a force of which I'm a part of, and it's going through us. And Bob, everything you said kept bringing me back to the golden rule. The way consciousness has to work is we have to be able to see each other where we are and identify that. And those qualities that allow us to do that semi-permeability, allows us to be more in touch, more in relationship. And again, it looks to me like we can get a huge unconscious flit of the intent of the whole gig in consciousness through this justice piece. And maybe I'm positivistic here. Maybe I just want to see truth, love, and justice. And so that's what
I agree with you, but that's part of the how also. And when I brought up gravity, I wasn't trying to say that gravity is the same as interpersonal attraction. But what we find when we look at systems is that the patterns that occur in lower order systems, simpler systems, if you will, are repeated in a similar way in higher order systems. So gravity that attracts us to the planet and attracts the Earth to causing it to spin around the sun is analogous to the psychic and physical attraction we have to each other, which is an essential part of consciousness. So it's not that they're the same, but but it's an essential law of humanity. It's something that we couldn't occur the way we are unless this thing happened.
So it's
that
innate
thing
to being a human being.
the way we interact with each other.
And there could be no
To
time.
the truth, justice part of it, and that is where the health, the health of the collective. And I'm struggling for words here.
No, I think
The
health and
of the
wholeness are the
collective.
words I use, and I think they're good ones.
Yeah. But it depends upon a robust level of truth, justice, and love. And that is where all of the different things that we then build within our societies are judged against that. And again, I'm using the word judge. It's not that somebody's, making lists but it's a society is not a healthy, whole society unless those things are operating effectively. Go back to Ruth Benedict and her study of various cultures, and she found that the societies that were the healthiest were the ones that had positive feedback loops that made the individual feel important and supported and part of the collective, as opposed to societies that forced individuals to fight against one another.
And that's the reaching for, to me, is how do we
exactly. But again, the why is built into the system in a sense.
I think
it doesn't work without it.
And I think that
So you're saying. So let me see if I'm picking this up correctly, Bob. What you're saying is that it is innate to being a human being, that these processes, that this is who we are to do this, that it's not something that's evolved, it's not something that we're learning, it's something that that is intrinsically part of what it means to be a human being. Am I getting that right?
Yes, but it is evolving with us. That's where, Redhawk was just talking about how communication has sped up over the years. That is part of the evolution of us as a species. It's just one little part. But all of these different things were there from the beginning, but they have changed as we have changed.
But have we changed, or is the evolutionary piece just that we are now becoming aware of something that has always been there?
Okay. This is where the whole this is where the whole metaphysic comes in, and what I'm trying to propose that being, we can talk about the first second after the Big Bang. We can talk about Higgs field and Higgs boson and how nothingness itself got thick enough to slow what was nothing anyway down to become something. We could go through the whole model of the universe evolution to the point where the three essential processes worked until life happened. Life kept doing the same processes until consciousness, it became aware of itself. And that's where we are today. Now, in that awareness of ourselves, we are waking up to new orders of understandings and more fine nuanced understandings. So they're not just yes and no kind of things. In very primitive people, the word for stranger and enemy were one word. That we've delineated so many different ways of understanding to the point now where we can see the whole planet and the diversity and the necessity of that diversity. And again, what I want our listeners to start using their little mind combs with, and this is Athena's stuff, is to comb through the culture, comb through your own way of seeing the world and how you've put it together, and look how the whys tease out. They're little pieces. And, Marianne, you always use the word relationship, and I love that word because it puts us with each other, in a very important and essential way. That's the semi-permeable piece. When Bob talks about health and wholeness, what constitutes a healthy way. I have a friend who built a hobbit house. He has dragons out front, and he had this event where he said, "Come and visit." Well, he went out a couple days later after the event. He left, and when he came back, there were people sitting in his living room, and humans with boundary issues. You see, semi-permeability, we're still trying to figure this out. You know, if you really want to see a place where it's trying to figure it out, look what's going on between China, Taiwan, and the United States. Talk about semi-permeability and what we let in and what we don't. You see, this is applied metaphysics. How do we get to truth, justice, and love? How do we tease that out? And how do we begin to tell stories? Because we've already been telling the stories. I don't care if it's Isaiah or Buddha or Lao Tzu or Jesus. There's stories about justice and trying to make the human family, a community, more whole and more healthy by finding greater nuances. So I see us as consciousness, and the three of us, we are it, man. How do we talk about places to apply this so that it can be seen more clearly by more people, so that they can see it in their own lives? And Marianne, you know, you and my wife and a lot of people in nonprofits, you're so caught up in the love and justice of it. It's fair to say, how do the rest of us get invited in who spend so much time insulating ourselves from even feeling that stuff?
Well, and honestly, I think it goes back to who are we? Who, you know, and I think that, and I say this all the time, that it begins with our own internal processes and finding out who we are. And I would say that we are each other, because every part of me that comes forward is because of an influence, whether it was large or small, but other people have infused in me. And Bob, you talked about even ancient texts and going back to, I mean, everything that I've read, whether I recall it or not, which is an issue these days, but it is a part of me, and it becomes who I am. And then how do I want to be in the world? And how do I want to bring love and justice? And what do I want it to just be in my circle, which a lot of people do? I mean, that's their thing. Or do I want to reach out to the stranger, to those that I don't know? And in my own life, I have been carried forward by the kindness of strangers. I would not be sitting here speaking with you right now if it were not for unnamed people that I will never meet that lifted our family up when we needed it. And so to be able to have that experience, so Redhawk, to your question of how do you invite others into that has to begin with them. And do they need to have a personal experience? No, I know many people that don't. And that are out there reaching because they want to have a why for why they're here. They want to find a reason to endure some of the hardships and the heartache that we all experience. And it's a balance, Bob, right?
Yeah.
We have to find a way to bring that into balance.
And everybody does have a why. I want to make that clear. You know, maybe you haven't been made aware of it. Every doctor, you know, they might be doctors for very different reasons. But why they became a doctor, there's a whole lot of science that goes into learning to become a doctor. But the motivation to become a doctor is filled with their whys and why they became it. You know, I go into why I became a minister, but I'm still working on figuring that one out. So, Bob, what was your comment? I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was just going to say there's another term that Marianne has used effectively in previous podcasts, and that's discernment. And if you look at each of us as an individual node of consciousness, we have the power of discernment to determine what information we accept, what information we disseminate, what the effects of that are. And the more we exercise our self-awareness and our discernment, the more effective we become as a conduit for the improvement of our society's ability to exercise truth, love, and justice.
Amen. And the health of the human family.
Exactly.
Yeah, very well said.
But it's right, as Marianne has often said. It's up to each individual to make that internal decision, and it's a constant thing that we have to keep doing moment by moment in our lives, because we are there's so much coming at us all the time, and we have to be able to decide what to do with it in the most kind and loving way for the rest of the world.
Yeah, and I hate to say it, but this has kind of become the shortest half hour of my week, and we're about there. So, Marianne, your comment, and then wrap it up with your final comment.
Okay, well, I'll just make this my final comment. And I think it comes down to awareness that we do have autonomy. We do have agency. We can decide how we see the world and what we want to see. And there are many years that I spent thinking this is just the way it is. This is just the way I am. And to come to a place where my thoughts have power, my words have power. I can choose how I see the world. And that is something that is extremely, to use that word again, empowering.
Amen. Bob, final comments?
Well, I'll just say that I agree wholeheartedly with what Marianne just said. And I would only add that when we, for one reason or another, choose to take a different path, to not take the higher road, if you will, that we're having an effect just as well. Doing nothing has as much effect as doing something in the larger scheme of things. So we have to, again, keep our awareness on where we are, who we are, what we're doing, and what are the effects of that. And if we don't, we're going to have effects in it anyway.
Yeah, it just gets back to intent in that respect. So here's the thing, my friends, and I will say this. Marianne and Bob set me up. They were great segue things. I love Bob's node of consciousness. I love Marianne's autonomy. Next week, we're going back to the one, but in a different way, because you see, we're not just apart. We need to also see ourselves as apart from it, separate from it. And I've talked about oscillating in and out of this center that is our deepest, most truest self. And we're also oscillating in and out of the one and the many. One of the first openings to this podcast was 14 billion years to get you here, the one inside the many, waking to the wonder. See, to me, we are the one, and yet we are separate from the one. Yet we are the one. Are we what? It's both and. I love, again, Bob's comment of node of consciousness. Consciousness is one, but there are all these different aspects that are flitting into and out of the great voice, the archive that becomes us, that builds us, that grows us into a new people. My friends, God's blessing, and always back to the one.